Hello, and welcome to our fourth episode of our podcast series with Eli, Heart to Heart. This is Lee Estock with the Leela Foundation. In this episode, Eli is interviewed by Sarah Bagley, where he talks about his role as teacher, the power of the Enneagram, and as always, the invitation to wake up in this moment and be free. Thank you for listening. Enjoy.
Eli, thank you for joining me.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Sarah.
When I saw your book and your biography, I was instantly hooked and so interested to talk to you and meet you and hear all about you. So please tell everyone more about yourself and who you are.
Who I am.
Yeah.
Who I am is completely empty. I am formless, timeless, spaceless. I am happy, fulfilled. I am love. I am peace. I am you. I am the same one that's asking the question.
I don't think anyone's ever answered it like that in my over 250 podcasts.
Well, that's good. I don't want to be like everyone else. Because that's the joke, see? People think that if we're all one means we're all the same. But we're all individual and we're all one. And that's what's important.
Oh, that's really interesting. What do you mean by that?
I mean, that it's like all the light bulbs in your house are all different, unique in different places. Some may be burned out, some may be brighter, some may be duller, some may be newer, but they're all running the same current.
That's
and so
true.
if you identify yourself with the current instead of with the light bulb, then you know your oneness. If you identify yourself as a light bulb, then you imagine that you're separate and burned out.
Well, aside from that, tell us more about the kind of work you do.
Well, I'm I guess you call me a spiritual teacher, so I'll go with that.
Okay.
My function in the world is to pass on the gift of freedom that was given to me, that everyone can wake up and be free. That's my purpose. That's my intention. That's my passion. And I do that through writing books. I do that through teaching with people. I do that through the Leela School, where I've trained trainers to take the teaching out into the world. So to become therapists and helpers and guides. That's my love.
Tell us about the Leela School. What does that word mean, and what do you offer?
Leela means the divine play of God.
Oh.
And so when you're suffering, it's called samsara. When you're out of suffering and you're in the bliss of the free play of life, it's called Leela. And so the Leela School operates in Amsterdam, in Sydney, and here in Oregon, where I live. And it's a training program for people who start with the basic foundation of how to be a true friend. And once you're grounded in both the insight and the skillful means to be a true friend, then we move on to skillful interventions so that you could be a therapist. I've trained therapists for many years. You can be a trainer, a guide, whatever your particular calling is, but you'll have the tools, the insight, and the flexibility to meet whoever might come to you for help and to be able to actually serve.
Oh, that is really interesting. This looks like a really wonderful, interesting place. And you talk about freedom. What does that mean?
Very good question. So when I started out my search when I was a young man in the 60s, freedom to me meant politically free. I started my journey by going to Alabama in 1965 with the marches there. And it was about everyone having the political right to vote. I mean, it was unbelievable that people couldn't vote in 1965 because of the color of their skin. And so I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college, and I went with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to where we were beaten by Ku Klux Klan on horses with clubs and whips. And some of them still had their state trooper shirts on. And that really changed my life. It broke and shattered my image of what it meant to be an American. And it then opened up the pathway of, okay, if you're on the bus for freedom, then what? And I kept getting challenges along the way. Oh, really? Are you willing to go this far? How far are you willing to go for freedom? Because I'd given my life for it, I said. But then I was tested. And eventually, freedom changed from political freedom or social freedom to the freedom of the realization of who you are. And that's the only way, finally, that this world is going to be released, is for everyone to wake up, to everyone to stop the madness, to stop the this consumer game, the shopping, an infinite number of distractions, and to put all of them down and to sit naked with yourself and face yourself and to say, what is my life about? Who am I? Because we think we know who we are because we were given a name by our parents. But it's like when you name your pets. I mean, is that really Bessie the cow? Is that really whatever it is you call your dog? I mean, those names are imposed from the outside. We very rarely question ourselves to say, who am I? If I'm not this name, if I'm not this body, then who am I?
I think that's a really hard question to answer. Honestly, that could take your whole life.
Most people never ask it. And it is hard. It's a life and death question.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to put yourself on the line. That's where life is. Everything else is a distraction.
Yeah, I think that's a very hard question because we either don't want to ask it because maybe we fear the answer, or it's really, I mean, I find it honestly tough to sit in the silence and think about who I am outside of being a wife and a mother and a sister and a daughter, because I can easily wrap myself up in those things because those are safe.
Exactly. And that's how people spend their lives. And then they find eventually they're not fulfilled. They're not in love. They're not living as love, and they're living as a mother and a daughter and da-da-da-da. And so then they pass it on. I hope their children will wake up. Their children will be free. Even though you weren't willing to take the step, the prayer is, well, my children will find happiness. But they won't, because you've taught them to be slaves. You taught them to be just like you. And so it gets passed on from generation to generation to generation, because few people have the courage to actually say, wait, enough. I must know the truth no matter what.
So what is self-realization? I feel like sometimes terms are thrown around and they lose their meaning. So what does that even mean?
It means when you ask me, who are you? I give you the answer. That's the answer.
And how can people get to that?
By being willing to lose everything else.
What does that mean?
It means to lose your identity as a mother, as a daughter, as a wife, as a partner, as a whatever it is you call yourself. If you're willing to lose that identity, you'll find your true identity. If you're not willing to lose that identity, then you'll just, pretty it up with angel wallpaper.
I think people feel like without that identity, then who are they?
That's the question. Then you begin. It doesn't begin before that.
That's tough for me because I think, well, I do and I don't.
Exactly.
So that can be a tough question to answer. And so how did writing this book or the stories in this book lead you from where you were to where you are now? How did this new book come about?
Well, actually, no. The book just came about because people would ask me about my stories, because I had such a unbelievable, because I crossed the line in the search of freedom, I had to leave everything behind. And in doing that, the world opened up. I had no money, I had no position, I had no career, I had nothing except this search. And it took me to places that you wouldn't believe. I lived 6 months in the uncharted areas of Peru, in the back country, living with Quechua people who'd never seen a white man, let alone a hippie. I was a hippie in those days. This was in 1972. That's the cover of my book. That's me in Peru. And that was the start of my spiritual search.
Okay, so let's take it back. Why did you decide to write this book now?
Because it's time to I grew tired of telling my stories over and over again.
So where did this story start? I know we talked a little bit about, I asked you what freedom meant, and you said, originally it was this political freedom. So where did this story start?
Okay, so where does it start? It started in Brooklyn when I was 3 years old, and I was in a street fight. And in that fight, I wasn't allowed to actually cross this. I was 3 years old. And so mothers were supposed to be out watching us. My mother was pregnant, so she didn't come out onto the street. And I ended up coming around the corner and seeing my friends from my apartment building being beaten up by the kids from the brownstones next door. And I came rushing into the fight to save my friend Mark, who was being hit by this kid. And as I ran in, I put my arm straight out in front of me. Mark and I had been watching cartoons and cowboy shows together, and I imagined myself as this cowboy on a horse, and I shouted out, "Don't worry, Mark, I'll save you." And I came charging in and pushed this kid, and he fell backwards against a rock. And at that moment, time stopped. Everyone froze. This timelessness was transcendental. It blew my mind. And the kid's head was bleeding. And as he lay there, you could see the blood start to ooze out on the rock. And as soon as I saw that, everyone else saw it also. And at that point, the boy realized he was bleeding, and he screamed. And his scream shattered that moment of silence. And everyone started to chase me. I jumped on my friend Mark's tricycle and tried kicking my way back to the apartment, came in through the outer door, started ringing the bell furiously for my mom to come down. And she was pregnant. She was probably on the phone. She didn't answer in time. And this kid came into where I was in the foyer and grabbed me by the ears and said, "You broke my cousin's head," and started beating my head against the wall. At that point, I started seeing stars. And I thought to myself, this is why they show stars in the cartoons when somebody gets on the head.
Yeah.
I got it. It was so funny. And then my mother came down, chased them away. I cried and ran in. But that was the start of my life. It showed me that moment of silence where everything stopped. And I loved it. I couldn't speak about it. No one asked me about it. I was punished for getting in the fight. I was banished from seeing my friend Mark because I was a bad influence. I mean, I had all these negative things. I knew I was a coward. See, that's another thing. Because I ran away, I knew I was a coward. I was afraid. I didn't want to hurt anybody, and I didn't want to be hurt. So that destroyed my self-esteem, destroyed my ego. So I was a coward, and yet I knew there's something precious that I had discovered, and I went searching for it. And since I found it this first time in this street fight, that's how I found it again. I found it again on the streets of Montgomery as these posse men came riding down the street on the horses to beat us up. This moment of stillness where the whole scene freezes for a moment. And all you can hear are the clip-clop of the horses on the pavement as they rode towards us. So that's how it started.
What do you think, you have hindsight now looking back at your life and how these stories piece themselves together. But at the time, what do you think you were looking for?
See, at the time, I was very, very lucky that I came from an unhappy, neurotic childhood. And so I felt I would never be happy. I saw that everyone around me was living a lie. They were all making believe they were happy. And I could see through the lie. I could see they were faking it. My mother was faking it. She, with her smile and being nice, she was faking it. She was deeply unhappy. My dad was deeply unconscious. He was friendly and he told jokes, but it was all, you could see it was all fake. And my neighbors the same way. Everybody that I saw was unhappy, suffering, and faking it. And so I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to pass that on to my children. So I made a vow when I was 10 years old not to have children, so I wouldn't pass it on. And then I had my life. I didn't have to be a father. I didn't have to support someone. I had my life. And what would I do with it? Since I wasn't happy, I could give it for something bigger than myself. I could give it for the world to be free. And that took me to happiness, love, fulfillment. It took me to bliss beyond measure. It took me to worlds I could never imagine.
So I'm really interested in this concept about happiness, but I wonder if that's truly what we're asking for. Because oftentimes people say, "Oh, I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy," but oftentimes I find people don't know what that means to them, or maybe that's not exactly what they're trying to say.
Well, everybody wants to be happy, quite naturally. The problem is everyone stays within their conditioned cage of unhappiness and tries to bring happiness inside the cage. So if you're born in prison and your parents were born in prison and they teach you the best way to get by in prison, where the good food is and where the safe cells are to live and where the better place is, and then you're in prison, you grow up in prison just like your parents, and you want to be happy, so you put angel wallpaper on the prison walls and make believe you're outside and make believe you can shop and make believe shopping is fun. It's like all of that is a distraction from the fact that you'll never be happy until you have a jailbreak, until you break out of prison. And since the prison is only in your mind, there's no external violence needed. There's no external breaking needed. It's simply your own willingness to confront yourself, to wake up from the conditioned slavery that was passed on to you by the slave parents you had.
So some of us might be able to take on some of these journeys and travel to places like you did to experience all these different experiences, but some of us can't for whatever reason. But it doesn't mean we can't find happiness, fulfillment, an awakening. How can we find that in our everyday life?
It's not in the adventure and it's not in your everyday life. It's in this moment, in you, as you are. You only will find it where you are. Whether you're on a mountaintop or you're in a cave or you're with your children or wherever you are, that's where you will find it. And the way you find it in that moment is by turning away from the false identity of who you believe you are. You believe you're Sarah, and Sarah's a mom, and Sarah's this, and Sarah's that. And if you're willing to drop the idea of Sarah, you'll find who you really are in the midst of whatever you call my life. And then you'll see that what you call my life is actually a trance. It's a form of hypnosis. And when you wake up from it, you'll find the reality.
Mm.
And that's where happiness is. That's where happiness is. The problem is, as long as you're in the cell, you'll never find happiness. You'll find moments of pleasure. You'll find moments of relief. You find, wow, you shop for something and you get it, and wow, that's so much fun. And how long does it last? It lasts
seconds.
Seconds, exactly. And that's how people spend their lives, feeding that, trying to get it to last, and it never lasts. Maybe a new car, maybe a bigger car, maybe a new house, maybe another baby. That'll do it. If only we had another baby, then we'd be happy. Oh, okay, let's have another baby. And that's the madness of consuming the world, trying to find happiness and never finding it.
It's easy, and I see what you're saying, to fall into that trap of this will make me happy, I'll be happy when blah, blah, blah. So how do we not do that trap?
By finding what you really want.
I think that's hard.
Of course it's hard. Otherwise you would be free. We wouldn't be having, if it was easy, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. How can we make small steps towards that?
No. See, you're already saying, oh, it's so hard, I need small steps. That's the slavery. It's not hard and you don't need small steps. That's just your mind conditioning.
How do you mean?
I mean, it's hard, I need small steps will get you nowhere.
So what will get me somewhere?
Find the willingness to be free no matter what. And then it's not hard and there are no steps.
When you were writing this book, you're talking with lots of different people. What did you find is like the common human thread of the human condition?
Everybody wants to be happy.
It seems so simple, but so challenging, yet so easy.
Because nobody's really happy and everyone's faking it.
What do you mean faking it?
I mean, acting as if I'm happy. You know, you meet someone on the street, say, how you doing? Oh, great. How you doing? Oh, great. You should see what I just did. You should see who I just met. You should see what I just bought. You should see what I did, blah, blah. You know, and then you can chat around how happy I am. And it's all bullshit.
Mm. Mm. So what does lasting love and fulfillment mean to you?
That's happiness. That's where you will find happiness. And you will only find happiness if you know who you are. Because how can you have lasting love and fulfillment if you don't know yourself?
Right. I think I find it challenging sometimes to know myself, and sometimes I feel like who I am can kind of shift and change over time. Have you found that?
Well, that's the nature of ego. And find that means you've discovered your egoic nature. There is also something deeper, which is your true self, which doesn't change, which is timeless and formless. And as long as you tell yourself it's difficult, it's hard, I don't know, that's just actually what that's saying is, well, I'm not willing because I'm comfortable enough in the dream that I have.
Okay, interesting. So you have done a lot of work on the Enneagram. And how does this work with the Enneagram?
So I teach the Enneagram very differently from 99% of the people. We all learned it at the same time. It comes from the same root of Oscar Ichazo, who's learned it from a Sufi in Chile. But most people call it the Enneagram of Personality. And it's not that. Because you'll find that people with the same character fixation, the same fixation, have very different personalities, but they have the same underlying character. And that's what the Enneagram is about. It's about how you are avoiding your true self by being trapped in the identity of your character, and how your character is used to hide a lack of essence. When you are in your essence as your essential self, character fixation doesn't appear. There is no Enneagram. Enneagram is how you can see who you are not. When you find your fixation on the Enneagram, you can find the fake you, the one that's been imitating you. And then you can stop. And if you're willing to stop, you wake up and you're free. You find you are the love you were searching for. You don't need love from the outside because you've already found the source of love inside.
Okay, interesting. So I think it would help people if we gave them an example, and I'll volunteer myself up. I'm a 3. So what does that, using the 3 as an example, what does that mean?
It means that you're living a life of deceit.
Ooh.
It means that you're wearing a mask. A mask as a mother, a mask as a daughter, a mask as a successful person. A mask as somebody who's friendly and helpful. And all of that is a way to hide the horror that you feel deep inside, that you're unlovable, unworthy, and not fit for life. And so rather than feel that, you bounce up into an identity as a successful, happy somebody.
Yeah, agree. Agree. I find that to be absolutely true. That is me as a 3. And I don't know all the other personality types in depth.
In personality types, because you can have that same 3 fixation and a very different personality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you look at you look at Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger's a 3. Do you have the same personality as Mick Jagger? No. Very, very different. But you have the same fixation. Yes. He also is driven by this deep self-hatred and self-loathing that he puts on a mask on top of to show how successful he is. So very different personalities. It's not a personality system. It's actually deeper than that. And so now that you see that that identifies your false self, then has to be the willingness to say, okay, if that's something that I can read in a book and I can see that it's not real, it's not who I am, since who I am is not this particular pattern which millions of people have, then maybe you want to find out who you really are. And so in the courses that I teach on the Enneagram, we have people who have this fixation and have woken up. So then you can see, here's the pattern. They're just like me, but they're awake and they're happy and they're free.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that. I'm going to think about that. It's something that's been on my mind a lot because I don't enjoy and I'm not able to be my full self or be happy when true. As a 3, my biggest fear is worthlessness, 100%.
That's it. And so that fear of worthlessness never gets addressed. It never gets talked about. It always is covered by how great you are and how wonderful you're doing and how friendly and helpful and yada, yada, yada. So that you go through life, people go through life without ever addressing that deep sense of worthlessness, of self-hatred. And since you never address it, it never changes. And since it never changes, at the root of all of your happiness is unhappiness. And there you go. And then you die.
I think it's hard. It can be challenging for people to sit with that uncomfortableness.
Yeah, of course it's challenging. If it weren't challenging, everybody would be awake and happy.
Right.
Instead, we have a world of suffering, and look at the fruits of it. Everyone in the world is fixated in their fixation and suffering and trying to be happy. And in that created the whole mess of the world that we have. All the madness.
I think the more willing we are, though, to sit with that uncomfortable feeling, like I'm perfectly happy to accept what you, and I can sit with, yeah, that is my 3-ness coming out. And the more I'm able to sit with that, I find actually happier I am because I can just own it.
Yes, own it fully. And then when you own it, you can discard it.
Right. Kind of like detachment.
Detachment. But then who is detaching what from whom? Find out. Who are you? Who's left?
I'm not sure I can answer on the spot. I'd have to.
Good. It's a serious question.
It's a serious question, yeah. I spend my mindful moments and my time when I meditate. Well, I guess the goal is to, well, I don't know. That I guess it can be different for different people, but I think about that a lot. These things that we're talking about and detaching from, who I think I should be or have to be because of whatever I've decided other people have told me.
Exactly. So your whole life has been on what other people have told you.
Yeah.
Even meditation becomes part of it. I mean, it becomes a cultural fashion thing, So right. It's really finally, that's good that you have these insights and you start to see, oh my God, that's not really me. Then there has to be a fire. There has to be a passion. And right now, all of the fire and all the passion is being produced into the false identity of a Sarah. Mm-hmm. So when you realize that it's not real and it's not bringing you fulfillment or love or truth, when you realize it doesn't touch the basic unlovability, then this fire for the desire for truth becomes stronger than the desire for Sarah. And you give your life to that. And then that's when life begins. Before that, it's all just walking trance.
I like to ask all my guests about what does living the bigger life mean to you? And to me, it means these things that we've been talking about, not accepting who I am because that's who I've always been or because my parents told me I should or what have you. But it's being willing to be uncomfortable and accept things about myself I don't love and explore how I could find more of my truer self. What does that mean to you?
Find out who wants to do that. Start with yourself, Mm-hmm. Whether it's me, I don't have a bigger life or a smaller life, really. I mean, I don't really make those distinctions. Mm. For me, I've lived as full a life as I can imagine. I never imagined I could have had this life. I couldn't think about it. I couldn't plan it. I couldn't say, ooh, I'd love to go off into the backcountry, unexplored areas of Peru on a horse. And like that never would have occurred to me. I never would have wanted it. Things have happened. I mean, I was in a Zen monastery in Japan doing Dharma combat. I mean, I was presented with a Zen teaching fan in Japan. I've been initiated into a Sufi clan in Morocco. I never would have wanted or asked for any of these things. I'm married to my best lover partner since 1976. We've been together, we've been through it all. I mean, I never wanted that. I never wanted to settle down. I never wanted to get married. I had vowed not to have children, so I didn't need that relationship. But it came to me. When I was 28 years old, I fell in love with this woman who was the brightest light I'd ever seen. I called her my goddess, and she still is. So I fell in love with a goddess. I never asked for it. I never wanted it. I never thought it was possible. So I can't say big life, small life. All I can say is that when you stay true to yourself, what appears is beyond belief.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this interview with Eli. For more podcast episodes and other resources, please go to our website, www.lila.org. For information on upcoming events with Eli and the Lila School, please go to www.lilaschool.org.